Welcome back to SuperWest on Sundays, everybody. Unfortunately, our buddy Dane Miller is out. He's in the middle of the either Arizona or New Mexico desert having a little bit of fun, so you will be missed today. But as always, I'm joined by senior writer here at SuperWest Sports in Stephen Villardo. I'm Nick Bartlett. I'm also a senior writer, and normally the three of us make up SuperWest on Sundays, but it's just going to be us two today. Yes, Steve. The first game I think we're going to start with probably the most highly touted, maybe not the most competitive, but what are your kind of just general takeaways from the USC Colorado game?
Uh, I mean, USC looked really, really, really good for about a little bit over 2/3 of that game, probably, and then kind of fell apart in the fourth quarter. And I mean, Colorado's got a good offense, so it. I mean, for all of Colorado's flaws, their offense, or at least in my opinion, some flaws. Their offense is very good, and USC actually did a pretty good job for the first half of the game, definitely, and then even into the third quarter. Um, and then just kind of let Colorado get back in it. And Colorado started making some plays to their credit as well. But I mean, USC's got they're still really good, but they've got a lot of things that they've got to fix and get right because I mean, you can't let teams hang around like that and make comebacks because I mean, no disrespect necessarily to Colorado, but you do that to a better team in this league, and USC is not walking out of there with a win if because Washington, even Washington State, Oregon. I mean, you got to play 60 minutes against those guys, and USC did not do that at all yesterday against Colorado. And I mean, and Colorado started making some plays at the end too, and Shedeur Sanders is a phenomenal talent without question. No matter what, I mean, even when they were struggling, he was still making plays in that game. But overall, I mean, if I watched the first half and then a start of the third quarter, I would have thought, the USC's looking real. This is good. This is going to be a good solid win on the road that they're picking up, and then they just let them hang around, and then the next thing you know, Colorado's got it down to 7 points, and is an onside kick away from recovering it, and who knows what happens then. But I mean that the defense was good for USC for much of the game. I mean, Mason Cobb had a great game for them in the middle. He ended up with like 10 tackles, I think, and like there were three of them for loss. We had a sack. No, actually, no, he had 13 tackles, 11 solos, two tackles for loss, and then a pass broken up that actually should have probably gone the other way. I forget who the lineman was that kind of dropped that one. I think there was a collision. They all kind of met at Shedeur Sanders, and the ball kind of popped out as they were all four of them were kind of just colliding into each other. Uh, so that was good. And then Caleb Williams was just phenomenal. I mean, I think there was a point in the first half where I think he had more touchdowns than he had. I think he had 4 touchdowns at that point and 3 incomplete passes. So I mean, that's impressive. He did have a pick yesterday, but ended up I think 30 of 40 for 403 yards and 400 and 6 touchdowns with just the one pick. So that's good. And then Lloyd is Marshawn Lloyd for them just continues to run well. I mean, he just gobbles up yards for them on the ground. So that's good. And then I mean, the receiving core, they're just so loaded with Rice and Taj Washington, who's really had a good couple of games here recently. I mean, Mario Williams is kind of the forgotten guy over there, but it's hard to think of because Mario Williams was so hyped coming in. But overall, I guess the short answer of it is a good win for USC. Should have been much more dominant, and I think it was much more dominant than the 7 point spread at the end kind of shows. But definitely USC's got to shore things up and can't let teams hang around.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I'm normally very careful when I like tune out games. 'Cause I'm one of those weird kind of guys. I don't like flashing from game to game. When I pick a game, I do my best to watch every play. And so when I actually walked away from this game, I don't know. I think USC was up by 27 points at the time, 21, something like that. And I was pretty sure it's over. So when I saw the final score, I was a little bit shocked. But two things come to mind here. First, I guess you got to start with the negative first. I think that's a little bit easier in general. One, human nature is teams will give up. So I think that's more indicative of not giving up. But USC they got comfortable. They got comfortable, and Colorado doesn't have enough talent to hang around now, or at least they made USC think a little bit. That's for sure. So I think that's just generally human nature, and USC really was the dominant team again. If Colorado completed the comeback all the way, the Buffaloes actually pulled off and got a dub at Folsom. then we can talk about this as some kind of catastrophe. I agree with you. Obviously, you do want to see teams close games out better because this could hurt them, like you mentioned. Whether it's Washington, I don't know if they face Oregon this year. Any good team, any and maybe a little bit better team than Colorado, great team, we should say, maybe, or I should say, maybe. But yeah, so and then on the other end of it, it's Deion's team did exactly what they said, which you do have to respect. They didn't. They could have folded over. They could have lost 50-0 this week, just like they did the week before. They chose another route. They kept playing, and now if I know everyone was watching this, but for maybe the two people who didn't watch it in our country, you look at the final score and it does look a bit better. So kudos to his team for losing to a better opponent but not folding, and to me that's important. I know that a lot of people probably want us to spend a lot of more time on this game. I think we watched a blowout, and I think we watched Colorado getting blown out 2 weeks in a row. So I think it's really time to move on to maybe a team again, and they have improved tenfold. I want to make that clear, but we're gonna.
They have 100%, and the future is bright for Colorado, no question. It's just not this year. I think we're in agreement with that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've just seen maybe what you could consider the top tier of college football looks like, and Colorado just isn't quite there yet. And so, Steve, the next thing I want to talk to you on is a team that may not be getting a lot of hype nationally, but Air Force is really playing good ball this year. Any takeaways from really, to me, just a shocking blowout win of SDSU? Expect
Yeah,
them to
Air
win.
Force. Air Force is playing excellent ball this year. They're 5-0 for the first time since 2003. I mean, and that season when they were started off 5-0, they ended up finishing 2-5 to go on the rest of the way in 2003. So I think they ended up 7-5 for the season. I don't think we're going to see that history repeat itself with this team. I mean, because they are the real deal. And I mean, Air Force. There's no surprise what you're going to get with the running game. You get that every week. They play really, really good defense. They've got a very good secondary. The front seven is solid. And against San Diego State, like you said, just a 49-10 beatdown of a San Diego State team. I mean, San Diego State's had trouble against the run this year, as it is. So, it's kind of. I kind of thought San Diego State would kind of shore things up in the run defense this year, or this week rather. Obviously, not an easy task against Air Force, but I thought they'd kind of get things a little more physical than Air Force has seen. And rushing wise, actually, Air Force only ran for 287, which speaks volumes to Air Force when you can say they only ran for 287. But I mean, I think we're going to get to when we get to the Player of the Week, we'll get to touch on some more Air Force there. But Air Force had almost 200 yards passing against San Diego State. I mean, and they still didn't throw the ball a bunch, but it's just Air Force is an extremely good football team, and playing defense well, extremely well, and running the ball is a formula to win a lot of games, especially road games. So Air Force, I think you kind of said it before we started, a little changing of the guard, perhaps, especially with the way they just dominated San Diego State in that game. I mean, 49-10 is just a complete domination. So a little changing of the guard. Boise State, they're 1-0 in conference. I think, as it looks now, I think you got a collision course in the Mountain West between Fresno State and Air Force, and they do not play each other in the regular season either. So, so they could be set up pretty well at the end of the year. Obviously, Boise State, Wyoming would have some probably something to say about just kind of penciling those guys in on October 1st, which we're not going to do. But yeah, Air Force has got Wyoming this week, and then Boise State in the last regular season game. So get through a good Wyoming team this week, and then Boise State. Obviously, what I was gonna say is Boise State dropped another one. We're kind of jumping around a little bit, but Boise State dropped another one at Memphis yesterday. Kind of let some things get away from them there, and couldn't pull off the rally. But Boise's still 1-0 in the conference as well, and then which when it comes down to it, that's really all that matters. But yeah, it's Air Force is an extremely good team, and the win over San Diego State was not necessarily surprising. The fact that they put up almost 50 points on the Aztecs, who are known for playing good defense, I think is shocking. And then the fact that they just boat raced them for almost a 40-point win is the part that's most shocking. I think the dominance of Air Force in that, it shows that I think this is a Falcon team that is 100% for real.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably good you touched on a couple things, because I mean, I think just in general, yeah, I'm being a little too beat around the bush here. Yeah, I think you're, pretty much right. That was a complete shocker result. Not so much the win, but like you stated, how it was done. San Diego State historically, I think you have a little bit deeper insight in the Mountain West. SDSU is one of those teams I've been covering for a couple of years. I haven't done every team in the Mountain West, a couple more recently this year. But yeah, they've always had a good defense. Feel like a fairly well coached team, and not a team you'd expect to just get blown out, particularly like that. And for me, looking at Air Force now, I don't think I realized how good their defense was with kind of some of your highlights there. So you combine that with a system based offense that doesn't seem like any team in the Mountain West can stop up to at this point. Any team nationally can stop up to at this point. Obviously, there's like an Alabama or Michigan, but like at least in regards to their schedule. And if you look at the way the Falcons are playing, they continue to protect the ball. I think that's a big one for me, particularly when you run the ball that much. You don't give the opposition short fields, and then maybe even sprinkling a little passing. And again, we'll touch on that a little bit later in the show. This team could be for real. And for those of you who just like football, I'd highly suggest tuning into the Air Force Wyoming game next week. I think that's a fun match. I think that's a nice stylistic matchup. And I think it's also just cool if you're kind of like an old Wild Wild West kind of guy. I think that's just kind of cool, fun game, and I'll be tuning in a little bit. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure, and that's going to be a good rushing game there too. But to touch on your point with the defense, they San Diego State 105 yards rushing for the game, 122 passing. So they shut them down. And then the other thing that Air Force is doing is they're converting third downs, which obviously, but then they are getting teams off the field this year on third down, which is also huge because I mean, when I wrote about the preview for this one, I commented how San Diego State would have to run the ball effectively. And to be fair, I was thinking it would be about a 6 or 7 point win for Air Force. I was thinking somewhere around like 23-17, lower scoring. But against Air Force, the other thing is it's just a physical offense with all that running. And they're beating up other teams' defenses. And the time of possession ends up being like 40-20 in some cases. It, and so, I mean, the key against them is to convert third downs then and get them off the field, or to give your defense a little bit more rest on the sidelines, because they're just, I mean, it's not necessarily the up tempo spread kind of offense but you're just getting pounded every play. And yeah, you keep your defense on the field too long and it's just going to get away from you.
yeah, definitely. So it looks like again, I think, and just to clarify one thing, I think Steve and I both said in different ways. I think when we're saying changing the guard, unless tell me if I'm misspeaking for you, we're not necessarily saying the Air Force is the best team in the Mountain West at this
No,
point, but San Diego State has been in that upper echelon, and with that type of victory, I think we both feel it's fair to now include Air Force in that top group at least.
for
So
sure. For sure. I think, yeah.
cool. All right, and then I think the next game we wanted to talk about here was Oregon State, Utah, and I'll start with this one a little bit. Watching this on Friday night, I think the bottom line is that at some point, I think it was October 14th is the official date Cam Rising is going to come back. But this team is now, it's very obvious. It's tough for me. I think I was a little bit too tough on Brendan Lewis, Colorado's quarterback last year. So I'll try and be a bit easier. But it was tough watching Nate Johnson. He couldn't throw the ball. He could not throw the football. He can't complete a quick slant. And you can't run an offense like that. I mean, Kyle Whittingham is a good enough coach that he's managed to do it for a couple of weeks here. But I mean, it showed in this week when you faced a real defense in Corvallis, a real atmosphere, and a hungry team coming off a tough loss to those guys over in the Palouse. And I think just again, it was tough to watch. They had thrown Bryson Barnes for a little bit, and he can throw the ball, but eventually it just seems does. He just looks like an inexperienced quarterback. He seems to always have one or two really untimely throws, untimely interceptions. And again, when you're playing a tough road team, that's not going to get it done. So looking at the Utes, bottom line, phenomenal. They're still exactly where they should be without Cam Rising, Brant Keithy. And if you're going to look at your one loss as to angry team in Corvallis, that's completely okay. On the other side of the coin, you're looking at the Beavers. I'm just thoroughly impressed by them. I would like to see a bit more out of DJ Uiagalelei. That was close. I've been working on that for weeks. But like, I just feel like he's really not. For a guy who came from Clemson, I'd expect a bit more. That's I think the way I'll phrase it. Granted, he's an improvement over what they had last year, but there was a point where they actually put in a freshman quarterback for a series who had to come in and throw the ball. I haven't seen him enough to remember his name, but that's kind of
Childs.
child.
Childs. Yeah. Is it Austin? It's Aiden Childs.
Aiden Childs, appreciate your memory. Yeah, and so like no elite quarterback. They don't do that. Like you're gonna tell that. I mean, again, I know me and Steve both coach. Like he probably coached a little higher level than me, but I coached some low level stuff, and you can't just say that to a player. But if you have a superstar out there, you're not gonna replace him for any series. So DJ, you'd like to see a bit more. But bottom line, love the way the receivers stepped up, and Bolden and Anthony Gold, two speedy guys, dangerous special team players. And then on defense, just they've had a good defense all year. They're hard hitting. They're vicious. They're a well coached unit, and the Beavers may have well kind of taken that top notch, or at least align themselves in that top group with Utah in regards to most physical teams in the conference. So huge win in Corvallis. Huge bounce back for the Beavers. Obviously, Damian Martinez had a good game. Not a great game, but he's just a really solid running back. Deshaun Fenwick helped out a little bit, and just a really good overall team performance. You got any takeaways? And one thing I wanted to add too, sorry, before I head over to you, Utah got really beat up in this game. A lot of injuries on the offensive and defense side of the ball. So now I'll kick it over to you, Steve.
Utah's got the bye week next week, so and then hopefully, like you said, Cam Rising coming back, so hopefully a little bit of time to get things back normal. But yeah, I remember Martinez was solid as a team. They got some running out of Bolden too on a couple end arounds there. I think he ended up with 53, but 131 total yards rushing for Oregon State. And this is, I mean, let's remember this is also a good Utah defense. So anytime you're getting much going at all, it's pretty impressive against them. But defensively, and it speaks to kind of Utah's struggles as well as Oregon State. But the Beavers held the Utes to under 200 yards total, 198. I think they only had 57 yards passing. 141, or sorry, I said that backwards. 141 passing, 57 rushing, and Glover, is it Jalen Glover? Jalen Glover for Utah ended the game with 58 yards rushing, but the team as a whole had 57 for the Utes. So that kind of just speaks to what Oregon State was doing defensively there. And the one thing I want to point on, and it's something that Oregon State will have to clean up, but it kind of speaks to where they were in that game. Oregon State had 11 penalties, I think, for 100 yards, which is, I mean, that's a lot of penalty yardage and penalties. And to still be able to kind of get a fairly comfortable win against a good team. Obviously, you need to clean up the penalties, but it kind of speaks to just how, I don't want to say dominant, because I don't know, 21-7. I think it's actually fair to say it was a dominant win for the Beavers, though, even that. So, and they shut down Utah. I think Utah was like 3 of 14 on third downs too, or something. So got to convert those.
Yeah, that was dominant. What we used to call a sport called football. You know, they were hitting out there, they were tackling. It was fun to watch. You know, I always, and also, I think player protection is obviously most important, hands down. But I love watching hard hitting football, man. I know a lot of people might get bored by it, but I enjoyed watching that game, man. Again, I would have enjoyed seeing Johnson hit a couple more slants so the offense could be a little bit more viable. But in terms of low hitting football games, I enjoy that. But again, I like it a little more if the offense is actually a real threat here. But let's see where we're at time wise. I know I was a little late today, so I don't want to keep you too long here, Steve. Cool. You got like, let's see, actually pretty decent time wise. Lucked out like that there. So I guess is there anything else you want to touch on in the Mountain West? I have one or two really brief thoughts on the Pac-12 before we hop over to our players of the week type of thing.
Well, just a couple things. Utah State went out to UConn, and it was a 10 a.m. start for Mountain Time, a noon start out on the East Coast at UConn. And Utah State's been coming into this one. They've been outscored 60-7 in the first quarter. Continued again this week. It's now 67-7 is their deficit in the first quarter. So the Aggies have got to start showing up, and I mean, obviously this one, the early start time body wise, but you can't really make that excuse. And I mean, they ended up coming back and getting the win against a UConn team that's now 0-5, but I expected more out of the Aggies all season, and let alone against UConn. And then Wyoming, and we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. I know you like to write in your previews about Wyoming and get your musical taste in there a few times too. But Wyoming is the team, and Air Force Wyoming. I'm kind of looking forward to that, like you said, coming up. But Harrison Whaley again ran the ball extremely well, up around 190 yards, 10.6 per carry for Whaley. And Wyoming's another one of those teams. They got to get more out of Peasley passing the ball, but really, really good defense and run the ball. So another team in the Mountain West, I think they're going to kind of fall off a little bit. I think you've kind of got Fresno and Air Force, and Boise State will be fine. I think in the long run. But then Wyoming's just kind of right there too, and could string some upsets too out there. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on real quick, BYU did not necessarily look pretty against Cincinnati. Again, they kind of let the Bearcats get back into it after having a good sized lead. But first Big 12 win for BYU, so hats off to them, good work. And Cincinnati kind of outgained them in a lot of respects, but win's a win, I guess, in the end. And BYU got their first conference win in the new conference.
Yeah, and they definitely needed that win after the tough performance against Kansas, where they really looked lifeless. And then touching on one thing, since it's probably a little bit easier to say it on like camera versus like writing. Yeah, my musical taste of Wyoming, it can be everything from Kid Rock to Ice Cube. I don't know why. This is America, baby. That's this is America. And then the other thing I did want to say is, like, in all seriousness to Wyoming fans, I actually am like a little bit jealous of the fresh air you breathe. I'm like Seattle is like smoggy and like damp. So like, yeah, maybe a little bit of jealousy. But then hopping over to the Pac-12, kind of the other two games you haven't touched on, or maybe there are three games, but Oregon, Stanford. Oregon did what they had to do in the second half. We don't need to spend time on that. They took care of Stanford. Got to respect Troy Taylor and his squad for fighting hard for a little bit, but again, the Ducks' talent level, again, just asked the Buffs the week previous, just a little bit too much. The other game was UW Arizona. You're looking at just a game again where UW. I thought Arizona did a good job of containing the offense, but at the same time, UW was the superior team. The main thing I want to say here is that Jed Fish's team really just fought till the end, and that's big for me. When teams fold, I think that's kind of indication of weak leadership, weak team spirit, team chemistry, whatever you want to call it. And again, they fought till the end, so a lot of respect to the Wildcats. And Fafita may be better than Jaden Delore. I'm just throwing that out there.
He looked good. And real quick, I want to before you go on, Arizona took away the deep ball from Washington. They didn't have. I mean, they completely took the deep ball away from the Huskies, and then you saw Penix with a lot more shorter passes, and they ended up kind of chipping away at them that way. But yeah, so it was a good scheme to at least take away part of it. Just couldn't take away everything. So go ahead. Sorry about that.
Oh no, you're 100% right. They schemed super well. They just basically made them dink and dunk the way. The only pass downfield was like to like a random second or third tight end. I hear what you're saying, and that could be something that teams use going forward as maybe a way to hang around. But main thing I was really impressed by Fafita, and again just the way the Wildcats kind of hung around and fought till the end and kept me up an extra half an hour. But hey, you got to keep playing. So I do respect that a little bit. And then the last game was Cal ASU. And all I want to say is, had Cal lost, I would be telling everyone that Justin Wilcox needs to be fired. They won. Good for you. And I'll leave it at that, because Wilcox, you needed that win. And if you did not get it done, I don't care about the stats. No, Jade not had a good game. I don't care about nothing. Cal won. They needed it. And if they didn't get it, I thought Wilcox actually should have been out of town. With that, Steve, I know we got about 4 or 5 minutes here. I want to hop over to they're really your players of the week. I watch the games. You've been doing a little bit more research. So let's start with, you want to start with offense, defense, freshman, where you want to go?
I'll start with special teams on this one, just and give credit to Dane, and then we'll go off on that. But Lachlan Wilson of Cal, making Justin Wilcox a winner there. The punter for Cal, I mean, player of the game for the Bears is your punter, so kind of speaks to what you were about to say, I think. But
they won.
They did. They won. And Wilson kind of did a good job of controlling field position and flipping it. 49.7 yards per punt. He had 4 punts that were 50-plus yards in the game, 4 of them that pinned the Sun Devils inside the 20. So, it's all facets to win the game, and Cal got it done on special teams with that. Offensive player of the year or player of the week, I'm going to go with Zach Larrier of Air Force, quarterback. He ran for 8 times for 103 yards in the big win, but 6 out of 7 passing for 189 yards and 2 TDs. So, it kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier, where San Diego State was not great against the run. I think they knew that they had to stop the run against Air Force, and you let those receivers get behind you, and Air Force will make you pay and make big plays out of it. And Larrier is made them pay there, and this is about the second game that he's done that. I think one game earlier this year he had one I think where he's like 4 out of 5, and I think it was like a 30-yard average on the four completions. So he's picking his spots and hitting them well, and it just proves that if you sag in too much, the Falcons will get you there. I'm going to stick with the Mountain West for my defensive player of the week. I'm going to go with Anthony Switzer. It's kind of between him and Mason Cobb of USC. I'm going to go with Switzer of Utah State. In that win, the comeback win, the Aggies kind of went back to Legis again at quarterback and got the win against UConn. But Switzer, 10 tackles, 7 solos, 3 tackles for loss, had a sack in there, so he was all over the place. Really not a whole lot of standout performances defensively this week, and he kind of stood out. Freshman of the week, you want to take that one, or you want me to run on that one too?
Yeah, let me pull up my freshman of the week.
All right.
What I got written here. Oh yeah. So yeah, we got Omarion Miller from Colorado. Just obviously came on really late in the game against USC. Kind of for a team who really is still looking for maybe a little bit more threats outside of Horn and Weaver. I think that he could be an emerging player. So I don't want to get too overhyped because, as I stated on earlier, I think that these stats may be skewed a little bit because a lot of them did come when it felt like the game may have been out of reach. But bottom line, you perform with all the lights on, the biggest game of the year, and put up some stats as a freshman. You deserve freshman of the week. So, yeah.
And 196 yards receiving too. So I mean, you put up almost 200 catching the ball. I don't care if it's in the fourth quarter garbage time alone. It means you caught a lot of balls in a short period of time. But so yeah. But I 100% agree with you. You can't get too hyped. But almost 200 yards passing. Good afternoon for the young man.
Thank you for calling me out for being a little bit of a hater there.
No,
I appreciate it. And then, no, I was definitely hating a little bit. And then there were 2 we had left. I think you touched on Lachlan Wilson already. You said Switzer. We had Omarion Miller. And then you got Zach Zerrier. Who are we missing?
Yeah, I got him in there too.
Is that
I got Larry in there
anyone
too.
else we missed? We got freshman offense, defense, special teams.
We got them all. The other options we kind of talked about, tossed around, were Harrison Whaley for offensive and Caleb Williams for offensive. But we talked about their numbers kind of during the thing anyway. So I think we're good. And we decided to go with Larry on offensive player. So over the other 2.
Perfect. All right, Steve. I know you're a busy man. You got to get out of here really quickly. Do you have a team of the week?
I was gonna kind of go with Air Force, but I'll stick with the Pac-12 or not the Mountain West, and I'll actually go with Fresno State. It was kind of less than stellar necessarily against Nevada, but it was Nevada who's lost I think 16 in a row now or something like that, the ridiculous longest streak in the country. And Fresno State didn't overlook them and continued to score, picked up a 27-9 win. So not that they would have sprung the upset, but I thought that they did everything they should do and got it done.
Definitely. And I was feeling a Mountain West school. I was feeling Air Force a little bit, but I think to keep a little balance, I'm going to go with the Beavers. It wasn't the most impressive win, but I think it's just so indicative of how far this program has come under Jonathan Smith. The fact that they could basically not manhandle, but comfortably take down a Utah team with or without a starting quarterback really shows to the progression of this program. So I'm thoroughly impressed by them, and may not felt like the biggest win nationally, but for their season, it's actually a pretty big stepping stone. So with that, you got anything else you want to add, Steve?
Yep, we're good.
All right. Well, hey, thank you everyone for sticking out here till the end with us. I came on a little late, and Steve was willing to stick it out with me as well. Felt like we made it, guys. We made it, guys. But no, in all seriousness, it wasn't maybe the most exciting. It wasn't the biggest slate of games. I know we got some bigger matchups going forward. Still had a little bit of fun watching the matchups. So as always, this has been SuperWest on Sundays. For Steven, I'm Nick. Deuces.